All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging deep, I mean really deep, into a piece of history you probably have no idea about. We're on the hunt for a story about the birth of video games, a story about a forgotten invention, a real ghost in the machine.
So let's kick things off with what seems like a super simple question. But trust me, the answer? It's way more complicated and, honestly, way more surprising than you'd ever guess.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we've got to set some ground rules first. I mean, before we can go around crowning a winner, we really need to agree on what an electronic game even is. And it turns out historians have actually thought a lot about this. They've come up with 3 specific criteria that something has to meet to even be in the running. Okay, so here's the deal. First, it's got to be electronic. Second, it needs an electronic display screen, not just a paper printout. And third, and this is the big one, it has to be interactive. You have to actually be able to play it. It can't just be some static demo.
All right, with our rules set, let's start the hunt. And our investigation is going to take us way, way back. I'm talking further back than Pong, further back than Atari, all the way to the years right after World War II.
So this is the year, 1947. This is where we find our first big clue. It's a patent, filed for a device that, at least on paper, seems to tick every single one of our boxes.
Now, it didn't have a flashy name like Space Invaders or anything cool like that. Nope, it was called, get this, the Cathode-Ray Tube Amusement Device. Super catchy, right? So who came up with this thing? Well, it was the brainchild of 2 physicists, a Dr. Thomas Goldsmith Jr. and Estill Ray Mann. And they were working out of Passaic, New Jersey, for a company called Dumont Laboratories, which is interesting because these guys specialized in things like military tech and, you guessed it, televisions. Now, to really get what this invention was all about, you have to picture the world it was born into. The timing is absolutely key here. It explains everything. Think about it. It's right after World War II ends. You've got all this incredible military technology that was developed for the war, and now, what do you do with it? Stuff like radar, advanced electronics, it's all just starting to pivot and find its way into our homes, into things like the brand new television.
And that's the connection right there. These inventors, they were literally looking at the radar displays that were used to track enemy aircraft during the war, those glowing green screens, and they had this spark of an idea. They saw the potential for a game, for pure fun.
Okay, so we've got the who and the why, but what about the how? How did you actually play this thing? Because the way it worked is, well, it's pretty fascinating.
The whole setup was pretty ingenious, actually. See, the machine itself couldn't draw graphics, so you'd literally take a plastic sheet with targets printed on it, say airplanes, and stick it right onto the screen. Then you'd use a bunch of knobs and buttons to steer this little electronic dot, trying to line it up with one of the targets. And if you hit one, the beam would go out of focus for a second, creating this flash of light on the screen, basically a little explosion. How cool is that?
So, let's recap. We have a device. It's from 1947, it's electronic, it has a screen, and it's interactive. I mean, that checks all the boxes. Case closed, right? First video game ever. Well, not so fast. This is where the story takes a really sharp, unexpected turn.
And here it is, the big twist, the giant paradox of this whole story. Because while this thing was technically the first video game by our rules, it was also a complete and total historical dead end. It was never manufactured, never sold to the public. It had zero, and I mean zero, influence on Pong or Space War or any of the games that came after it. It just vanished. Poof! Gone without a trace. In fact, it was so forgotten that the patent wasn't even rediscovered until 2002. A French video game enthusiast just stumbled upon it while doing some research. Think about that for a second. For more than 50 years, the secret history of the first video game was just sitting in a file cabinet in a patent office, totally forgotten by the world. So this brings us to the final verdict. The big question we have to ask ourselves after digging all this up. Does the Cathode-Ray 2 amusement device really count as the first video game? And here's the final, kind of ironic twist. The only real echo this invention ever made in history was as a single footnote in another patent.
Yeah, the 1947 patent was cited in a patent from 1972 for the Magnavox Odyssey, the world's first commercial home video game console. So its only real impact was as a piece of legal homework, something the lawyers had to mention.
So, that leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on, doesn't it? This whole story isn't just about some old forgotten piece of tech. It really makes you think about what it means to be the first. I mean, if an invention is created, but nobody ever sees it and it doesn't influence anything that comes later, does it even count? What do you think?